set of numbers up there, and somebody kind of figure out maybe that's a little low. Is there what we want to do? And the staff, or the two staff, or the 50 and 100, or leave it where it's at? Any thoughts from the council before we move on to the beverage component?
I would suggest going up if she's really in a third of her time.
Any other thoughts? Leave as she's recommended for the year, or go up now to 50 and 100?
You just go. I go up.
Yeah, let's go up. If there's a lot of people, you want to go to 50?
50 and 100?
You have to move everything else up too,
Yeah.
in a corresponding way.
Still not gonna be a money maker, but,
Still be one.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'll work on it and get back to you. I did check with the high school, just, and their fees, were, we're close to, we're about $35, if they were to rent the, cafeteria. So it was 0, 35, and then it went up from there. So if a club was to rent it, they're gonna have to pay either nothing or 35 versus what they're paying here for a little nice facility. 50, I think, would be, this is a little nicer than just getting the cafeteria. So I
wouldn't even bother having a unique fee for our school.
You're just charging the resident rate?
Yeah.
And that's what that is. That would be the 40, or 50. It would be 50. And what I'm saying is it's not that far off what the school's going to charge their own clubs. Either it's going to be free or 35 for the cafeteria. Yeah,
and the deal, then they have to go back.
they might. And but I've heard it's rumored that that's going to change. New school is going to have, vacancies there. So
That's
I
cool.
don't think that much is different for having it here if we go to 50. I think it would be okay.
So are we required by state statute then for this new student policy to be a part of our budget process?
Has to be part of our fee schedule.
Yeah, you can actually adopt a fee schedule anytime. It doesn't have to be part of the budget process, so if you decided in September, you can just do it now.
Okay.
If it material affects your revenues or something, you can adjust the budget accordingly, but you don't have to.
So we can reestablish the fee whenever we want. Thursday, we're going to be cookies.
And then you want to do 90, we're going up $10. You want to do 90 for community room or you want to take that down? Or this would be just non-residents, non-businesses.
Use 100.
100. Okay, so I will play around with it and bring it back to you. Okay.
And if there's any more data that you have, you can put down that would justify it, whatever.
Yes, I will. And this is one that we didn't have in it and I really need it. What I had Shane write up is something that I can charge the renter for coming early or staying late. I've had rentals come an hour early and call me on the phone on a Saturday and that's why it's not open. And their stuff's all packed out there. I've had them just showing up and believing it. And I've had nothing in field policy that allowed you to charge them anything above at $20 an hour, which they didn't care about paying. There was nothing. It was easy. So this would just take it to 15 minutes before we increments would be $50. Where they're gonna start cleaning up sooner, they're not gonna wait till last second. More longer to get out of here on. So it's kind of a that sort of,
If you're gonna use 4.5 hours, split it to the 4.5 hours.
yeah, we don't do half-hour increments. I have looking at for exactly the minimum and roughing and saying, oh, I'll just do another.
Why don't you have that?
Because we were at $30 an hour, it just wasn't, yeah, and it's hard for me to get them on it, I like to give them the time that they can do that. Why?
Especially if you're charging more.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at that's what your directions, I was just trying to simplify, I'm trying not to go back to the big stuff, I'm just trying to keep it small.
I like that, you know what I'm saying, if it's two, and so this is only 30 minutes to come out.
I mean, if that's what you want, we did do that before.
Do it 6:30 rather than.
Well, they would, 3:30 is an hour.
It's actually only an extra 50 for each of those if it's unplanned. If it's
Yeah.
planned, it's only $50 for a net hour. And
Yeah,
so if
so
they
just
schedule it,
plan it
yeah.
and schedule it and come in and pay. A lot of times they just try,
Could you give the room on
I
there out
think
of that or
if I
something?
do that, it's gonna go back to them saying, oh, give me that 30 minutes, and it's not really gonna be 30 minutes. If I don't do.
But this is a penalty.
This is a penalty for them coming in earlier or late.
But you're right, she's already doing 15-minute increments of 1 hour.
Okay, so then, the alcohol, what I found is that, there was 3 facilities that, or 4 actually, facilities that, serve alcohol that are government owned. Holiday Wheel, they do not have their policy yet, they're waiting for ours.
That's weird, 'cause that's
Let's
where I
send them
got
a
it from
bill,
originally.
shall we?
I don't get it.
They
That's-
have
that's-
emailed Paula twice, and they don't have their actual, what they're gonna charge or anything. They're gonna do it, they don't, she says that she does not have it ready. So,
This is, we've been singing this song for 15 years.
oh.
Wait till we do it, then they'll come along.
So I've
and
kinda,
say
with
the cost.
the ones that I have, I just kinda read what they had and then worked close with Shane on, is it possible to have alcohol here? And this is what I would recommend it if we had it. Service of alcohol beverages other than beer or wine is prohibited. So we're only allowing the 2, beer and wine. Alcohol service permitted only in full compliance with the alcohol beverage control. Alcohol may not be served at any event to which the general public is invited. It has to be a truly private event, or which will involve the direct or indirect sales of alcohol. So even a truly private event, they still cannot sell at the event. Or charge for a meal that you get the alcohol. Alcohol must be served only by a licensed city approved alcohol server. That means that I've already vetted them, that I know that,
And, the alcohol.
for a catering company or bartending service. So that's what we're asking them to be through, that we have.
So the license.
Yeah, they work with DABC, they know the DABC laws, first of all, and then they have their own policy that this is their policy that they follow, sure that, that we have already checked out, that we like the way that they're doing it. That's kind of how and that's what the other places were, is they had a list of caterers that you could use, or bartending services. And then these places also, they have the insurance that we would check into, the correct insurance, and they work with us, and they know me, so then they would know how to fill out
the insurance that we need, which would be the next one, caterer and bartender services are required to provide us insurance coverage. So with me knowing these places, it's easy for me to get the insurance, and they know to send it right to me. And then the city reserves the right to require such additional liability insurance coverage as city deems appropriate with the connection of events. The city already has that in the policy, whereas if we was to have a event in the community room, that we could already tell them that we need additional insurance because it's something that just might cause us might cause an accident or something like that. A lot of already like if for Butlerville Days, there's a lot of those places that I ask for liability insurance. So a lot of these other agencies are, I think even the rec center, I noticed, they already do. If you want to rent anything out of the rec center, you have to provide.
Let me just jump in here. We will not for any alcohol claims. And if there is an alcohol related claim, I can almost guarantee you the city is important. But if there's a catastrophic dram shop type claim against the city, 1 million is not going to go far. And so we need to have the ability to get other insurance if we think it's necessary. We think that there is insurance available. The alcohol server certainly can get it, but for whatever reason, the trust will not provide it.
The trust,
either as a rider or anything else.
Yeah, the trust did provide me a couple of, I think there was like 4 companies they gave me, and I checked into 2 of the companies that do they're the tulip policies for any kind of event that you have that you can go and buy this insurance. And one, I you just
How much coverage, Ann?
it was the million. I printed it off for you too. Yeah, it was the million. That it was what you.
So this would be another million on top of the million that the alcohol server is.
So $250 for sort of double coverage is what you're saying.
Well, the caterer is providing their own. So whatever they're paying the caterer, right? And then whatever, and then
the caterer doesn't insure us.
No, they have their policy.
No, they will. It will. It will.
The other policy would need to add us as an additional.
Will be
insurance.
additional.
So we're just talking about the city getting additional insurance.
Right.
So there seems to be a source for it. It seems to be a fairly modest cost, and so Anna will just have to keep on top of it and require that when it seems warranted.
Shane, what I hear you saying is that $1 million, including us additional insured, is not sufficient?
What I'm saying is if there's a say somebody goes out and kills a car full of people, $1 million is nothing. Yeah. So.
You didn't have to kill anybody, you just.
Yeah, well, maiming is going to be worse in many cases. So, anyway, understand that we are going into an area where there is risk that we have not had risk before, and we will not be able to cover that risk through our normal insurance. So we've got to look for other ways to cover the risk.
But based on your and your legal advice, if the alcohol server has insurance and there was dram shop liability up to, I don't know, it says, is it 2.45 million?
That's where we need to get under governmental immunity
So
right
that,
now.
that should cover the risk.
That should cover most of the risk.
And what would the risk that we're not covering?
The difference above $2 million in coverage that we would have. The governmental immunity cap is what you just read, 2.45.
2.45.
Yeah, so it's $450,000.
We're not sure.
Right.
Well, that's assuming we only required $1 million and the other $1 million was that.
If you require
1.5 million, I don't think you can get it in $500,000 increments, so you're gonna have to require another $2 million probably in additional insurance.
Definitely have to check on that. I know it's not just multiples of the one. As you go higher, those
least on some of them, have escalated quite a bit, so 2 million is not just
Twice as much.
twice as much, it could be 3, 5, 10, or 20 times as much. Cause we ran into that with, Butlerville Days one year, they asked for more coverage, and just like, it's how much?
Oh, for the fireworks. wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was like twice the cost of the fireworks themselves. So we would have to be very clear on, you know, if we're doing the 2 or the 3, what those premiums would be.
So we'll have to be careful on insurance issues when these things are booked.
Historically, most organizations have just always stayed at that 1 million, but liability's gone up so high, it's no longer the norm.
It would seem to me that you just ask for the amount that would cover off your risk. And that would be it, no matter what the cost is.
If that becomes prohibitive then when actually using it, that's,
So I know the caterers do the million, the ones I talked to, so I would have to see because, these 2 companies didn't let me go above the million, so I'd have to just call and ask how to do that.
But you said that there are 4 other government agencies that allow this in their buildings, so they must have figured out how to cover it.
They're doing the same thing, they're just
Just
doing
a
the
million?
TULIP, they're just doing, yeah, they're doing the same thing. Is caterers and then the TULIP policy.
and who are those other, we've got 17 cities in the county, plus the county.
So what I
There's
found,
lots that aren't.
it was tough finding these. The library called the Viridian Center,
Viridian Center.
the Meadowbrook Golf Course.
And golf courses are covered by the can be covered by the trust.
All the golf
That's the
courses.
one policy the trust will write is for golf courses.
I thought it was for beer only though.
Oh, I don't know. 'cause
Yeah, I think it was only for beer on the
So
golf
if we
course.
start golfing here, we got it covered.
Accidents.
Yeah, I think it was for just the beer on the golf course.
Every day?
And then the old city building, in Salt Lake, the one on 451 State Street.
City county building.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do the arts festival, they do.
They were
couple-
supposed to
do
send me their
couple-
policy and they never did,
a
but they
couple
do
Pretty big
have it there.
items down there that.
But I think this is at the building, right, inside the
Yeah,
four
yeah.
corners.
Yeah. And then Holiday Will. And I think there might be a couple more golf courses because they have the beer license and the trust will
Well,
do it. But that's all I
They do
could
it
find.
at the softball complexes on campus, they have to go to the county council, get a waiver and special dispensation.
Yeah. Everybody I talked to, all the other cities that I tried to get in contact, they would just come back as,
All
no,
the
we don't
golf
have it.
courses.
I can't find anyone. These are what, I think there was one more that you wanted me to check and I can't remember who that was. I don't either. So.
Well, first on the fee part, I think there's a consensus and direction.
Yeah.
What's the feeling on the beverage use?
I've got a couple concerns, I don't know that they're deal breakers or not, but one is, I mean, the trust part was new and concerning. When I talked to you a little bit this afternoon about this, I started seeing the Mountain View Park project of, being the only one that's doing it in the area and starting to collect a lot more, reservations that way than, I guess what you could probably call our fair share. If this is already taking that much of your time and effort, that, I can see that being a concern, maybe we need to, if that was a concern, I'd say maybe we put this part of it off for a year and see how things go as people are finding out what's going on with the new fee schedule to see if it's something that we can handle. But there's some places I'm happy to step out and be innovative in. I don't know if this is one. If it turns out that we're like the only ones.
If you wanna mitigate that concern, you could make it just available to residents.
I think another point maybe to what you said is that these rentals will be much more demanding to manage and set up than the rentals we're doing now.
What do you mean by these?
These where you have to go be sure the insurance policies are all correct.
Time
Why
consuming.
is that? 'Cause you
as
just
well.
get a certificate of liability, it's a, from an insured person, I don't know what's.
The hoops
what's the
you have to
different
jump
box.
through.
It's like a box, and you check it, right?
If it were that easy, but it's not gonna be that easy. You're gonna have to explain to these people all of these hoops they have to go through. And you're gonna have to be sure that your coverage is sufficient, that you have a licensed approved server, that you vetted them and approved them. I just think these are gonna be more complicated for you to manage.
Yeah, there'll be more work. It's not just a regular room rental. I do the special event permitting. Some of the places here do the alcohol and get the alcohol and permits and things like that. So it's gonna be more into that kind of area versus what a room rental is. Just, there will be more paperwork involved and more time for me to do it, but.
If I may, also there's, I believe, a clause there on the policy that says if within 5 days they don't get the policy, you would have to go and get it for them. So that just might be another area where it could be time consuming, is if they don't provide the license within, or the insurance, I'm sorry, within 5 days of the event, that Ann would go and have to get that insurance
Why
for
would
them.
you just cancel it?
I mean, or we can, yeah.
We can.
Which would have been Annie's first.
We could.
That seems pretty obvious right there.
100 people outside the doors, it's like, well, sorry.
We could, that's your policy decision.
So Scott, you're saying no, Tyler, you're saying yes?
Maybe you charge a little bit more for, to compensate for Ann's additional time.
With alcohol served?
If I kept that off, due to the fact that they have to pay for a caterer and then they have to pay for the insurance. And so I didn't add that to that. I was trying to keep the fees minimal, but it's up to you guys.
You have to understand that Miracle Moore felt very strongly about charging almost anything for these rentals, and so Ann is very
I'm
mindful
scared,
of that.
yeah.
I was thinking about the film Michael Moore.
And
The
so-
documentary, I'm sorry, it was Michael Moore.
Mayor
Oh, Mayor
Cullimore.
Cullimore, oh,
Moore.
sorry. It's
Sorry.
like, I thought you said Michael.
Miracle Moore was very insistent on
When-
keeping
when-
it as low as
yeah.
possible, so.
I had the fees at $35 and it was brought down to 20.
But we also did that because we didn't know
We didn't know what
was
we
going
were
on.
gonna
We
get.
have a lot better grasp, and
Yes.
that's why, I mean, I would probably, if I had, if my way, I'd probably just take care of the fees and get all that stuff taken care of, and then let's discuss this in 12 months, or, 9 months or whatever it is, when we've had a little more time to figure out real impact on your time and whether you have the headroom to handle.
Well, as soon as we raise the fees, we're gonna have a reduction in requests for.
Right.
Maybe.
Well,
Maybe.
you assume we're
You're
making-
still
it may
well
go-
below the market.
Yeah.
I mean, the market, your alternative in most cases for a room of that quality is way more expensive.
But now the recreation centers know this will be under that market. I think it will still reduce, but I think it almost needs to be big, so, yeah.
And honestly, it gives me a little more time to just kind of wrap my head around the concept. I'm not, I'm
Okay.
still kind of there. I had some more, I'd hate to put the other stuff on hold, but that's where I'm at.
Tyler, you're,
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we should move forward with it. I think that it's fair to the residents of the city that wanna have a wedding that includes wine.
Christine?
Well, our debt service fund, the building bonds in 2014 and 2016 were $1.126 million. And to me, that means that all residents should have the ability to use this building, with wine or without wine. And I hate to feel like there's a part of our community of which could use this for that purpose, can't. We have, as I I've said before, I think, we have a police department right next to us. And, I just don't see crazy group weddings or whatever happening in our facility. I'm just not seeing it. And I think the policy is so strict that I can't imagine many people are even gonna act upon it, so.
Michelle?
I think we should form a citizens committee, study it for a couple of years.
Years?
Get all of our feedback in,
Then put it on.
and then put it on.
Put it on some kind of
Make
a
it part of the
survey.
make
Yeah,
it-
put on a
Make
survey,
it part of the ADU policy.
and I think that'll get us there.
There you go, Mike, I say a year and you just take that.
It's getting late, uh-oh. Tim, as city manager, what do you think you're gonna have to administer it all?
I think if we're covering, I mean, if we're addressing costs, so what has been suggested about looking at additional costs on alcohol, I think it's something that we can do, and we can make it work. There are strict requirements, obviously, as you mentioned, Councilmember Michael, but I think it's something that we can administer and do with these insurance policies.
I know Mike was being, Councilman Sheldon was being a little facetious, but
No, anyway,
it may
I'm
not,
always
it
taking
may
this
not
seriously.
be, well, I assume the two or three, I could be wrong, if so, then I apologize. But that's certainly something that would bode well, that could be one question item on the survey. I mean, I think it would probably, it'd be illustrative
I
of
mean, of the
it.
600 people that will respond to the survey, I don't know.
Actually, we
Sorry.
had 1,200 the first time.
Out of 34,000.
I mean, yeah, but if you do stats and all.
If we have that extra money in the election fund, could we get it on the ballot?
You could, yeah, absolutely.
That way we'll get all the people to vote on it.
With a 40 or 50% would vote in those.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I agree with Tim. I think my concern is liability. You know, I'm open-minded, myself, you know, I wouldn't take advantage of it. I think the policies are strictly enough. I think it's gonna be once or twice a year, really. I think it's gonna be so minimal. But it gives those people who are serious and wanna do it, if all the protections are there, it's got the minimum of 2.5 million liability coverage that we put it in, and after a year, if it's problematic, we can be more restrictive, but, I'm okay doing it.
Would you also include that as just for residents? I actually
Yeah,
like that.
absolutely.
I like that addition.
Residents only, 2.5 million to cover any risk.
And you can
So
increase
the
it.
extra 1.5 is mandatory, and it's just for residents.
I would increase the room rental as well.
For alcohol.
Not because I think it's going to be any different than grape
More
juice.
time, more time.
But I just think it's.
Yeah, more, and additional time, yeah.
You're doing with 0.05 right next to these departments, so I do not.
Okay, Ann, enough direction to proceed?
Yeah, no,
So we'll work on another version of this with these changes and then bring it back.
I wanna make sure, but again, usually I wanna make sure the staff feels comfortable.
I mean,
With those protections.
I think it's something that if it becomes, overused or there's a concern, a problem in the room. I have a couple of room monitors right now that do not wanna work with the alcohol. So that's one of my problems that I have to look into.
How many do you have on call? And you have a
What,
couple?
Oh, do
I only have 2 right now.
and a couple of them don't want to?
That's pretty, well.
It's 100.
It's, so that's something that I have to look into.
That's crazy.
No, just.
But
Oh,
I think it's something that we can work with, and if it seems to be, too many rentals or too big of a problem with the parties, and I have had some parties that have gotten a little crazy.
Well, I think,
But I mean, we can relook at this, in 6 months.
but I think you do that alcohol, not alcohol. I mean,
Yeah.
I did room rentals for 45 years, and I've been burned on both ends.
Yeah,
I've seen a little party, I went into a band, floor because the amount of alcohol that's poured on the hardwood floor.
Right, that's carpet in there. Yeah.
I've seen others where it's perfectly, as clean and as professional as you
Professional,
see,
yes.
there was just
Yeah.
no problem with this. I've seen both, so it really
We don't know
comes
what we're
down-
gonna get.
Well, it comes down to
Yeah.
clarification and communication, so I've seen both, I've been a party to both.
We don't know what we're gonna get, and so I don't mind giving it a try and coming back to you and letting me know if there's.
But I would encourage though, in the thinking going forward, it's Councilman Meyer saying, on the more restrictive side, higher fee, don't
I think,
put us in jeopardy.
I've only been asked about 5 times if we serve alcohol. So, you know, but word of mouth does get out,
Oh, yeah,
and we'll find out how it goes.
Yeah, that goes.
No,
well, I
we
would
say
say
alcohol
if
too,
you become-
we're only
if you
talking
become the one
beer,
who's
we're only
doing
talking
it.
beer and wine.
It's just, yes, beer and wine, yeah.
So, we'll work on it. Can we bring it back as,
Please,
or,
yeah.
do you want it back here, or can we bring it back as a
I bring it back
proposed?
here one more
Can we
time.
bring it back here one more time? Okay, that's fine. I think we can look at that.
I don't mind the 5, I'm just afraid what happens if it becomes.
Well, I think all the numbers are a little startling, so as a matter of policy, we should also think about how much we wanna rent the space as it is. If it's the law of diminishing returns every time we rent over it.
But also, also to me, it's a public service too, that's why I'm sure this is, it allows the community to have a place they can eat, and we've done a lot of those in our community. It's like the HOAs who wanna come here rather than the library, because it's more conducive to their feeling. All right, we got a couple more things
Thank you,
real
Ann.
quickly.
Have a good
Ann,
night.
thank you for staying,
Oh, that was my phone.
appreciate it.
You never spend a late night over it.
Oh, I never. Take care.
Okay, a couple more items, so I will quickly, this next is Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan. I know this is a topic that's, over the last, few months is increasing in popularity as far as our constituents, and I know the staff have worked on it since 2017. We had a grant from Wasatch Regional Council to do a original plan and at least 2 scoping meetings, and we had a draft for a while, and now with UDOT extending its EIS and the increased participation they had in their last open house, I think a lot of new issues that are arising, and so let's see where we are and how we want to proceed.
Sure,
I'm
so.
sorry, can I just ask Mayor one
Please.
question in terms of scheduling? At the CWC meeting the other night, what was your feeling in terms of when that process will?
And I think they handed something else that was at the end of 2020.
No, but when they're going to, because initially it said that the comments were going to cease indefinitely, but it sounded like the CWC was going to recommend to UDOT that the carrying capacity study should go parallels.
Parallel.
So if this indefinite numbers, it's gonna jump
Yeah.
back on the tracks again and get going. So I guess from this perspective, I just wondered.
We have some time.
We have some time, but
Yeah.
not a lot of time.
Well, I think we want to, as fast as we can, because we want to influence UDOT. The carrying capacity is going to go back to the stakeholders committee, and Dr. Bricker will kind of see if she can herd those cats into some direction. But I think this was on a faster track previously because EIS study for UDOT was to have ended, was it last year? The last year, when's the original time frame?
I think it's 2019 originally.
Was that what it was? Now I've extended it another year or 2.
I think it's 2, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I thought
it's
too,
2.
yeah.
But then a comment period also closed on the 4th of
Well,
May.
the public comment period for the last scoping was supposed to close on May 4th, and it got switched to until further notice.
That one of them, but there's a second one where there's public comment that was actually remained in May. Is it the TAB or whatever that was?
Well, oh, you mean the public
Yeah.
transportation, the two
The
studies
action
of
plan.
transportation action plan for the 2 canyons, yeah, that's separate.
That's
That's
just
how
kicking
we do it.
off. We attended a kickoff meeting for that process earlier this week.
Well, then the staff person who's gonna be leading that, who just resigned from CWC, So, we'll see
Jesse?
where that, Jesse, yeah.
He was at the meeting.
Yeah, well, he's until the end of the month. But the point being is we have, I understand we have a commitment from UDOT to work closely with the city of Cottonwood Heights to listen to our position. And this plan is to represent our position. And so I think it's critical that we try and build consensus among the council. This is what we would like to see there. Again, this is a
the process, in terms of when the open houses occurred, related to the preferred scenario, because
Yes.
in my mind, the preferred scenario was picked after the 2 open houses without community input being able to comment on the preferred scenario, because most of the comments I'm receiving, people are like, I like the preferred scenario, but when you read their comments, what they think the preferred scenario is not what we've written in the
Okay.
document.
Sure, I'll touch on that quick.
Thank you.
So the plan started in fall of 2017. A stakeholder group and a steering committee was established that included UTA, UDOT. A lot of people in UDOT to get to the right people. It took us a while to get there. It included neighboring communities and moved Utah for the active transportation component of it and others. The project team, obviously, and city staff. We held an initial open house. So the project team developed some project goals, which you see here. We held an initial open house to present these project goals for feedback, as well as to present the background data, the existing conditions analysis of the corridor. So, the traffic information, the traffic projections, the neighborhood connectivity or gaps in the connectivity, trail alignments, that kind of thing. Things that are existing today were presented at that open house. We got a lot of feedback, made sure these goals were moving in the right direction. Each of those was kind of, we got positive feedback, to varying levels of positive feedback on each of these goals, and felt that they were all important to include here. Using these goals, we developed planning objectives and scenarios to visualize what the planning objectives and what the goals really helped achieve. And those are the 3 scenarios that are shown in this slideshow. Those were brought back I don't know the exact date, winter or spring of either winter 2017 or spring 2018. And again, reviewed by members of the public. Those scenarios were built out of, it's the best analogy I have, is a bunch of Lego blocks. And we all the blocks are the same, and we built 3 different scenarios out of the same blocks. And each of the blocks in the scenarios corresponded to a way of achieving these goals and the objectives in the plan. So we did test the 3 scenarios. We thought all scenarios should be tested. One was a control group, the do-nothing approach, let the regional plans drive the future. And then 2 other ones proposed varying levels of development and philosophies on transportation and transit. Given the feedback we received from that second open house, 3 scenarios, we created the preferred scenario. There was nothing inherently new in the preferred scenario. It was just disassembling the 3 that we tested for feedback and building them up in a way that was responsive to the public. The main change being one of the scenarios we tested scored well in almost every category, but was not popular because of proposed development along Wasatch Boulevard corridor. That was met with a lot of opposition by the community, even though it scored okay against the project criteria. So in the preferred scenario, we took that portion out and said focus development at the gravel pit. That was the major change. We did not have an informal or a consultant-hosted open house with the preferred scenario. So the preferred scenario was based on the feedback we received at the second open house, and that was incorporated into the draft plan, and then we started the formal hearing process with the Planning Commission. So while there wasn't a dedicated open house to get feedback on the preferred scenario, we did initiate the public hearing process with the Planning Commission, which consisted of, I don't know off the top of my head, multiple Planning Commission meetings and hearings for that feedback. And then we've rolled that into feedback at the City Council level. Again, when it's at the City Council level, it's never closed. But to answer your question, we did not have a formal open house outside of Planning Commission to present the preferred scenario. Although I feel that
Opportunity to do so through the Planning Commission.
yes, and the draft plan's been on the website since we had it, and we feel that it's been available. That being said, here's the plan goals. I won't read through these. You've got a copy of the plans, but they range from preserving the character of neighborhoods to moving people through the corridor reliably and safely, to sustainable canyon access, to active transportation, to development. It's a broad-reaching set of goals. And
can be
achieving one goal, really well.
They're not exclusive.
Right.
They can't be all, and they're not all 100% inclusive.
Correct.
Like
Achieving
any
one
plan.
goal really well might score really poorly against another goal. So it's a whole process of checks and balances. These 7 goals were used to develop 3 planning objectives. One's focused on the gravel pit. This is all language in the plan itself, but really what this is saying is we want to focus development in this area at that gravel pit site. We want it to be a mixed-use development that has flavors of canyon recreation, pedestrian accommodations, trail access, that kind of outdoor base of the mountain kind of thing. And we want to incorporate a major transit hub at that location. Beginning of the process, there were a lot of recommendations to enhance the park and rides along the Wasatch Boulevard corridor that are already there. Build onto them, make them bigger, make them, make structures there, get more parking there. Throughout the process, through feedback and through analysis and looking at that, we thought that might not be the best way to really get people out of their cars. A better way is to focus and consolidate transit stops at a major hub north of the canyons and south of the canyons, which is outside the scope of this plan, and make a more point-to-point transit system that stops at the major hubs, gets up the canyons, and kind of gets the park and ride traffic off the corridor. That's where the
bullet points, Mike.
Uh-huh.
I advocate for a running water feature in an outdoor amphitheater.
sure, yeah.
This would be my passion project.
So where we landed with planning objective 1 is we want to focus development along the corridor at the gravel pit, disincentivize or don't make it a priority to look at redevelopment opportunities along the corridor itself. We keep it at the gravel pit. That's the site that has kind of been identified for this kind of thing, including an integrated transit hub that will serve canyon traffic, but hopefully doesn't sit vacant 300 days a year, and has that year-round benefit there. This is also envisioned to create a more consistent transit network looking into the future, maybe connections into rail stations, the Murray Track Station. Just a way to get people from tracks, from Front Runner, from the major tracks line east, where those gaps currently exist. Part of this is that any development at the gravel pit site, small scale, large scale, is going to generate a decent amount of traffic. So an analysis of that, the corridor in front of the gravel pit site, so Big Cottonwood Canyon and north, needs to be included in any of these scenarios. Okay, moving from the gravel pit, planning objective 2 is more of an active transportation recreation objective, is to create a connected network of paths and trails for transportation and recreation along the entire corridor. The concept here is a continuous multi-use path separated from the Wasatch Corridor itself that will get pedestrians, that will get casual cyclists to recreate along this corridor. Right now there's no sidewalk, there's not anything. There's a bike lane on the corridor for the dedicated cyclists to ride. That on-street bike lane is not proposed to go away. That is still there for the dedicated cyclists, but we're emphasizing this multi-use pathway along the entire corridor as well. As part of this contemplates pedestrian crossings and recommends grade separated crossings to make getting across Wasatch east to west safe and easy. We don't really want pedestrians to be crossing at grade level if they don't have to be. Leveraging existing trails and paths into a larger network, so that would be connecting this multi-use pathway into Ferguson Canyon access, Bonneville Shoreline access, Deaf Smith Canyon, and other trails that are developed, tying these into a cohesive network. And then continuing that trail concept through the gravel pit, connections to Bonneville Shoreline and other trails through there. And then planning objective 3 is to balance, this is a wide-ranging one, the livability, the roadway capacity, and sustainable canyon access south of Big Cottonwood Canyon. The bullet point here, I got a good response from Christine on this that we will certainly add is, this plan is not proposing to add roadway capacity. There are regional plans in place that do that currently. UDOT has plans to do that, and the Wasatch Front Regional Council Regional Transportation Plan recommends adding roadway capacity. We're saying with our plan, okay, we acknowledge that these plans say that, but we want to do that sensitively, and I think your recommendation was as needed, or something along those lines. We don't want to default to just widen the road and then that'll solve the problem, because we don't know that it will. Another component of this is strongly considering flex shoulders, and this will be reflected in our preferred scenario cross section. If there is roadway capacity added, let's look at the use of that added capacity as more than just a dedicated vehicle lane, whether that's HOV or bus lane only during peak hours and it's non-active on off hours, whether that's future BRT dedicated lanes. We just want to consider using that roadway capacity in a more creative, more progressive way. Slow Wasatch Boulevard speed limit. This was heard throughout the project and is something we have stressed strongly to UDOT. Understanding it's not without its challenges, federal highway standards and everything that we'll hear about that. We still feel that vehicles.
Is it a state highway? 201?
It's a state highway.
From where to where? From
the interstate
all the way up to Elsa?
up to Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Just to the intersection?
I don't know once you get in the canyon.
It's not the canyon.
I think both of the canyon roads are state roads.
Both of the canyons are state highways.
Are they all the way up?
I think so, yeah.
That's right, because UDOT.
They are.
The turnoff at Giverny is
Turn off the-
is
yeah.
not.
But
Yeah, that's right.
as you get in the canyon, the traffic speed goes down, obviously.
Right, and we feel like we're making traction with that. We're not in a place where I'm, completely
But
satisfied with that.
in UDOT CIS meeting, I stood at that table and that was a common sticking that was on. And in the preliminary report we received this Monday, that was something that was highlighted.
Some other things in here, so I don't lose the crowd. We want to improve neighborhood access. We want to improve that safety, but we want to maintain the aesthetic and the character of this corridor. We heard that very strongly as well. We don't want to see this, a Redwood Road, Bangor Highway kind of situation. We want to preserve this natural aesthetic that we have running through the area. through native landscaping, through landscape medians, limiting additional canyons parking along the corridor. Really keeping that corridor clean outside of native landscaping, aesthetics, recreational amenities. So these are some examples. Most of these pictures are from the plan, some are not, but this would be a 5-lane cross section with a planted median, and this is where we're, if where this goes, we're saying, for example, the outside lanes would not be dedicated 24/7 vehicle lanes. They would be used as needed for HOV, carpools, transit, etc. More examples of the character that a landscape median can add. And then this is more of a future concept. This is Yosemite National Park, and this lane is just one direction of travel, but that empty lane right there is a bus-only lane. So the vision here is if you're sitting in the line of cars there on Wasatch and you've got a clean lane and buses are flying by you, and you've got a really easy place to park at the gravel pit and the bus is going to come every 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to be incentivized to get on the bus and be in that empty lane driving by all the cars, hopefully, to get to your destination soon. Okay, I am not going to read through all these. We'll be here all night. So these are the 3 scenarios. So scenario 1 is kind of the control group. This is if we didn't have a plan in place, what would the regional plans dictate for this corridor? And what we see is kind of more, what you would expect to see out of a state highway project. A 4-lane corridor with center turn lanes, no median. You might have some basic pedestrian improvements like a 5-foot sidewalk. Additional capacity, adding capacity and lanes is really the regional planning answer to this, and we feel like there's a more creative solution. We're still proposing multi-use pathway segments with this, access management principles like forcing right turns out of neighborhoods and eliminating conflict points. Trees or walls to block noise, increasing capacity of park and ride lots along the corridor. The scenario 1 does not contemplate a transit hub at the gravel pit. And development at the gravel pit would emphasize just the market potential there, which is going to be largely driven by the office development market. Again, we feel like there's a better opportunity than that.
So that's a dud scenario.
This is the control group, really. We didn't ever anticipate this to be a popular one or the one we would recommend, but it's one that needed to be shown as if this plan didn't exist, if we just kind of let things come and happen as the regional plans and documents said, this is kind of what we might expect to see. And this is based on the Wasatch Front's Regional Transportation Plan. The park and ride component of it comes from a 2012 Canyon parking study. And then UDOT's just, they're planning. This kind of predates the EIS. So that's an example of a cross-section you might see along Wasatch Boulevard. This leaves out the middle turn lanes, but there would be middle turn lanes as well. But you can see no median, no landscaping. You have that shared use path, but not much else there. Scenario 2 was called, what did they call it? East meets West. I think they called it that because there's some East Coast development concepts that don't have a lot of precedence here. The big drastic change in this one is the Wasatch Boulevard cross section was tested with just 2 general purpose lanes with center turn pockets, but then strategic local access lanes separate from the corridor, essentially frontage roads to access neighborhoods. Still the multi-use pathway and this one did propose a transit hub at the gravel pit and a more intense development and some minor development at the swamp lot. This is an example of a cross-section you might see under this scenario. Some concerns we had with this, this theoretically might be great, but the minute we're talking local access road, we're talking a city-owned road, and that's right-of-way that the city would need to acquire and a road that the city would need to build and maintain. And where UDOT's right-of-way, they are not keen to give up their right-of-way for a city road. There are some implementation challenges and costs to this scenario. So we went away from this cross-section partly for that reason, but some of the concepts you'll still see in the preferred scenario. Scenario 3 is called recreation villages, and this, the big component of this is it spreads out development throughout the corridor into, varying levels of development at particular sites. The gravel pit is still a higher intensity development, but maybe not quite as high as the other scenarios. And then we look at sites like the swamp lot, the Elias Church property, and another location on the south end of the corridor for recreation villages, so smaller mixed use, transit, pedestrian, active transportation oriented developments. And the corridor cross section you see here is actually almost identical to the preferred scenario cross section. So you see a 5-lane cross section with some important caveats. This plan contemplates shared use pathways on both sides. The center turn lane would be developed with landscape medians where there is not an intersection or a turn pocket. Native landscaping in the middle and on the edges here. And then the flex shoulder, and I think it's key to read into the small text there, is what's being proposed is a flex shoulder, open to vehicles in peak hours, particularly HOV and transit in peak hours, and then an informal bike lane or a wider shoulder the rest of the time. So that's not employed on a full-time basis. That's just as needed.
I think the fear amongst the public is build it, will get used.
Now,
Keeping it dedicated to a flex is a challenge.
it is a challenge, and all of this is a challenge because we ultimately don't have full jurisdiction or even partial jurisdiction of the road. So UDOT can come in and say, we understand these plans and we'll work with you as much as we can, but if they have a regional goal, they're still gonna have authority to come in and say, we get this, but we're gonna widen it.
I look at that, I think we as a city should fight for skinny, fight for less.
Oh, there's a lot of risk there too, because when you make something so completely atrocious that nobody wants to use it, the people who pay the price are the ones who live there, because it is so bad that they don't wanna use it either. So do you want to have ski traffic on ski days every morning and every evening, Monday through Friday, year round? So you can't just say, shut it all down and make it so atrocious for cars that the only people who are gonna suddenly magically appear are everybody on bikes and on buses, because there are gonna be some people who want to do both.
Let's get through Mike's
Yeah,
presentation.
and the
then we'll
concern
see
there
where
is
we're at.
if we take, in our opinion, if we take too much of a hardline stance, that's not helpful. It's not always realistic. We feel like this is a pretty progressive approach to this, and this is outside UDOT's realm of comfort, but something that they've started to toy around and work with. Understanding this is a long-range master plan, if UDOT decides to come in and add capacity right away, they may still be able to do that, but we're always going to emphasize, if you're adding capacity, let's contemplate more how we're using that capacity rather than just widening it for single occupant vehicles. And this ties back into the transit hub concept, the transit priority throughout the corridor, the fewer stops, the streamlined transit service to the canyon. So those three things, as I explained in the process, were kind of taken down. Some of the things that maybe scored well but weren't popular were taken out, and the preferred scenario was developed. I'll touch on a few things here. Like I said, the cross section is actually the same as the recreation villages, and I actually swapped the graphics here. So this is actually the recreation village cross section, but the right of way itself is the same.
Sorry, Mike, just on this one, it's just on the right side or east side to me, that you'd have the shared use path. You wouldn't have it on both sides, correct?
They probably won't allow you to have both. would they?
Right.
Well, so that kind of brings us to the EIS process.
I'm sorry.
It's related though. So UDOT has right of way to build a road that resembles this cross section with a shared use path on one side. They do not have full right of way to develop that shared use path on both sides.
In some places they have up to 200 feet, correct? Some places they
Yeah,
have up to.
there may be room in
5,
some places. There's also places where they have right turn lanes that aren't reflected in the standard cross section. Bengal Boulevard,
We don't,
areas like that.
no, we don't have like the width.
Well, so primarily 150 narrows to 77 and 94.
Assume, how wide are you assuming those lanes? Sorry. Can't remember.
I did the 11 to 12 feet, probably 12 feet.
So what's the width of the whole cross section?
That makes the question.
wider than what you got.
I think this is conceptual, but this contemplates this is wider than what UDOT has in places because of shoulder and curb and gutter and.
It's like 100.
trimmer.
Was
It's
it
not
About
a-
132 feet to
By the way,
150 miles.
If you just think of each of those as
That's the right of way though, that's not the
Feet.
cross section.
that really
Yeah.
includes the two pathways.
I think it would all fit at 77 years old.
What we've been told is along from the high T essentially to Big Cottonwood Canyon, there's right of way to construct a 5-lane cross section, a buffer, a landscape buffer, and a shared use path on one side, but not on both sides. So going back to the preferred scenario, that is the preferred cross section, again, through the heart of the city. It's a little wider at the gravel pit. That's your 215 interchange. That's, that gravel pit's gonna develop, potentially with a lot more traffic impact, so the capacity would need to accommodate that. But it does drop off significantly when you cross, Big Cottonwood Canyon there. A few highlights here. Lower speeds is on here. Roundabouts, and I say, or other traffic calming measures at major local accesses. This complements lowering the speeds, and this is a design approach to lowering speeds and mitigating speeds. Understanding if you have a wide straight road and you just put a lower speed limit sign in, people probably aren't actually going to slow down. But if you design it with medians and you've got, you know, a safe buffer, but you see pedestrians and human activity there, you might be incentivized by design to slow down a little bit. So that's a part of it. Flex lanes is a big part of this proposal. Grade separated pedestrian crossings, integrating any canyon signage into these crossings. We kind of want to avoid the big metal bars overhanging the roads that tell us what lanes are open or how much parking is up the canyon. So we would propose working with UDOT to incorporate that into any pedestrian crossing concept. A continuous shared use path along the corridor, trail connections regionally. There is an emphasis provided in the preferred scenario that's not in others. Emphasis on Highland Drive connection through Sandy. That is not part of the scope of the area, but a lot of the traffic through here is commuter traffic from Sandy. And they kind of have options. They can come up Wasatch or they can go west of the interstate. A lot of people come up through Wasatch because there's that gap in Highland Drive. So part of this would be continuing to advocate for the connection of Highland Drive to serve as another commuter collector corridor to offset some of the impact.
Where does Chris McCandless stand on that?
Do you know where the
Uh,
presentations
I don't
for
know, but I think
tonight
that's.
are? Those
I thought that.
presentations?
What's that?
Who'd have thought?
Very recently I heard.
That connection is also in the regional transportation plan.
Yeah,
They may be at EIS level with that one.
Excuse me?
person's probably gonna, they actually think it even possibly
No,
look
it's
like a
13.
bridge would be cheaper than a
Sort of
landfill.
Well, yeah, but the bridge is on 13th.
I thought Middletown Preservation shut that down pretty effectively.
Well, they shut down the asphalt pathway just recently. I don't know about the bridge, but maybe, I know they did previously years ago, yeah. But anyway.
We see that as an important
Yeah.
commuter connection where
It's gotta
there's a
help
big
with
gap
the-
right now, and that will have an impact on Wasatch.
So the numbers that are in, all of the maps with the 44% increase and the, all those, that's assuming that nothing else happens.
That's a no-build scenario, and I responded to a resident today and then got confirmation from Matt, our expert, that I responded the right way. That contemplates no changes to transit service or routes, no changes to the right-of-way, no changes in the road network itself. That contemplates a growth factor of population, that's essentially inflation, just a factor, and then that contemplates major projects in the area, the impact they may have. And that divides that equally across the year to average daily trips. So that's where we left off. The preferred scenario really is a lot like scenario 3. Scenario 3, the recreation villages scored the highest against, in the quantitative analysis against the project goals. However, the developments at the swamp lot and elsewhere along the corridor were not popular publicly, so we took that out. So the preferred scenario actually scores slightly less positively than scenario 3, but is more responsive to the public feedback that was heard through the public feedback process. So what we have is a preferred scenario that still incentivizes transit, transit priority along the corridor, incentivizes gravel pit it recommends development at the gravel pit, a transit hub at the gravel pit, reducing the amount of park and rides and other conflict points along the corridor itself, and adding that strong emphasis on active transportation and recreation along the corridor.
Can you spend just a couple of minutes and give us sort of your gut feeling, based on your meetings from UDOT, how they're feeling about our Wasatch Plan?
Sure.
Sorry, I should have ended with a question mark.
So they were involved in this process, and we didn't start with the right people there, but we ended, John was our main contact. He's running the EIS now, so we've had this relationship for a while. So he understands what's emphasized in here. We had a lot of meetings with UDOT, different officials at UDOT, especially Region 2, to go over the goals and the objectives to make sure there was nothing in there that was a glaring, just no way, no how. We are, that being said, pushing the limits of their comfort today with some of these concepts we're proposing. Roundabouts is not in their realm of comfort. The flex lanes isn't something they're used to doing. Landscape medians.
Enhancements are.
And yeah, so betterments, so the landscaping would be, as of today, a city cost, but we're at a point where
They would build the medians, they just want to the shared use path.
We do, yeah.
It'd be part of the trail system.
We are making traction on the lowering the speed limit concept, and credit to a lot of the residents that have met separately with John Thomas and expressed the same thing. I think as a community we're all on the same page about that, and we've got an analysis in our plan that really shows it doesn't change a whole lot if you lower the speed limit 10, 15 miles an hour. Don't know if it'll be in the first phase of their plans. They may, they have the option to just widen capacity and test out some things, but we feel that even if they do that, we've got this plan in place to continue to push UDOT and UTA to change the function of that lane as hopefully the other principles of this plan come online, and we have a transit hub at the gravel pit, and we are thinking of ways to incentivize public transit rather than single occupant vehicle trips. So I'm optimistic at this point. And that's as good as I can say right now, but
Can we get an MOU or something from them? You don't ask, right?
Oh, we can ask.
Well, I think once we have, if we can develop a consensus among this group on this plan, so they can see we're all on the same page, I think now's the best time, not just with UDOT, but also with Solid County, to join with us. And I was talking to Mayor Wilson just Monday, and we're concerned, to be frank, about some stakeholders wanting to go too slow, and a couple of us want to go a bit quicker to make sure that we don't get bypassed in some of our recommendations. So I think our first thing is to develop a consensus, making sure we've got everybody's input. We've got youth meeting today, we've got NISDOT, and maybe other things, and see if we can get that, and get the Solid County to join with us, and maybe even Sandy is not for us because of the transit, I don't know. But these,
They like Wasatch Boulevard being wide.
yeah, but even if it's just us with the mayor of the county, who really wants to move and wants to push not just UDOT but UTA. And we've been meeting with UTA just in the last week or so about Laura Hanson, who's the director of planning, rethinking UTA's approach to service to the canyons. With the additional money they just got through the transportation piece, and the pressure they're getting with Carlton now, who was with the county, who's now one of the trustees. So the time is right to really push, but I think the framework is here in this plan. If we can just provide those tweaks, Christine's comments today were excellent. I think it's just some tweaking there, and with Melissa's comments today too, I think almost all of hers are in there personally, it's just having Mike go through and make sure that, we've met some of those things. And then get UDOT, if it's, I don't know if we get something legal, as far as maybe having, but sure get some type of understanding.
So, I'll leave on this. UDOT has engaged Cottonwood Heights to work on a corridor agreement, which is essentially an access management agreement through Wasatch Boulevard corridor. It's still in progress. I haven't received an update in a while. But as part of the scope of that, I made sure that the scope includes recommendations from the Wasatch Master Plan in the final corridor agreement. Before we
So
sign it.
define what a corridor agreement is.
A corridor agreement looks at, I don't know if you can jump in here, but it really looks at managing access along the Wasatch Boulevard corridor. It looks at, it's gonna look at sites like the gravel pit and identify how many
Do you need any documents
intersections should be there. They should be
that
full
we sign
intersections, or they
tonight?
should be partial. It's gonna look at any other, conflict
Ordinance
point or drive
along-
approach or intersection along the corridor and analyze whether that should be full, limited access, et cetera. And that will contemplate the process for creating new accesses on Wasatch and
And as new development, the city signs on, and as new developments come along in those, the developments are held to whatever it's an access management process. So it becomes a binding document that we agree to, and so if a project comes on board like the gravel pit, these are the assigned locations for access, and they have to work in those areas.
Or the disbanded property.
Yeah, or, whatever's on.
any property, it'll be a parcel
Any
by parcel
property
analysis.
adjacent to Wasatch, state-owned Wasatch.
From my perspective, and I'll just take 34 more minutes on this. But I've been involved with UDOT in a regional plan on State Street, and it went from, we had everyone from Salt Lake clear to Draper on this study, and it was an extensive study. I'm very encouraged that we're this far with them and continuing to work towards this, and they're working with us. Because they were involved in that process right from the beginning, and then they started not liking some of the concepts, and they just pulled out. And the plan finished, and nothing was ever implemented, and they were never part of the approval process. So I'm very encouraged, we're still engaged, that they're still listening, that we're talking about 35 miles an hour, that these concepts are not something that they're just pushing back and saying absolutely not. That encourages me. We've got a long ways to go still, I agree with that, but that's my perspective.
Their goal is, they're a state agency to handle state roads, and that's to get you from this town to this town to this town. It is a little bit of a different conflict.
This is unique
They
with
used
the
to have a
canyons, I
scanner
think, you're right,
that would give
and with the 13 million
photos.
that's allocated for the
and it would do PDF,
property
but then
acquisition,
I ran
then the
free
time is
trial.
right for us to be at the table, not just with that parking hub, but with the development of the gravel pit, and how that is not a detraction from our city, but an asset to our city. So we want to be heavily involved.
Yeah. Tim said that at a certain point, they're gonna take they're gonna fulfill their directive from the legislature or the executive branch, I guess it's the executive branch that runs that place. But,
At least right now, and I've been in dozens of meetings with them right now, they're saying the right things to us, is that they want us to be a part of it, they want to listen to us, and so I think we take advantage of getting this plan completed as soon as possible, and represent our
And
position,
I can get
so
the
that
city's account.
our talking points are all consistent, and then using our lobbyists, our legislators, the county, everyone to try and keep us to that plan. So Mike, where would you like to go now on this?
Well, so
What direction do you want?
I want to continue working. I think the feedback I received today was really helpful. I want to continue working and making everything I presented tonight is truly how I feel this plan is written and what it recommends. And I'm in the process now of going through and tweaking language in here to make sure that this plan clearly conveys that.
All the comments you've gotten this week, you're going to address those?
Yes.
I don't mean just in the plan, either in the plan or respond or.
Yeah, the plan is
Instead of
to,
waiting versus- I mean,
Yeah,
don't,
set a meeting, say,
yeah, don't feel like we need to spend a bunch of time writing words. I'm happy to sit down
Yeah.
with you and.
Yeah.
My goal would be to incorporate any tweaks into the plan. I don't think, from what I've heard, it's going to change the purpose or the intent of the
Yeah.
plan, but it will clarify things and make it more helpful and
Yeah.
readable.
More clear.
Implement those, get those in the plan. When those are in the plan, we'll get them back to you as a council.
So let's talk timing really quickly. When do you want this back before you, in this setting, to talk about potentially the final changes or these changes? We just need to know when you want them back.
Well, I think it's more of what time Mike needs to do what he wants to do.
I'm thinking back in this meeting, the first week of June, the first meeting in June. Back in this meeting after we met and talked about all of these changes, we can talk about it in June, see where we're at, and then depending on how comfortable you are, we can define when we wanna consider this.
Well,
Which may be down the road, I don't know, but
It was like last November, wasn't it?
maybe, but
No, I think first week in June is great. I think that once, like Christina's offering to meet with you and go through her list of things, Mike has done that, I've done that. You two need to feel free to do that. Then once all those inputs are in it, then another opportunity, I'd like to have another opportunity to read what those modifications are, because I wanna work hard with CWC to be an advocate, as well as the county who has means to help us as well, and then with UTA, yeah. If we have that plan in place, it becomes the tool, not necessarily the hammer, but the tool to show that we've done our homework and it's well thought out, and it represents not just our position, but our constituents as well. So if,
Yeah, no, we'll plan on that. Any feedback that you have, please let me know. And like I said, I do think this plan really tried hard to get the input of the residents and those affected in this community.
as far as the
incorporate those
consultants
things.
who work on this, they're done, they're paid, they're gone, right? So this is now all on your shoulders. Okay, any further discussion on that? If not, we'll turn it to Mike, let you respond and incorporate those changes, and you've got offerings from the council to meet individually, and
Okay,
as we've done.
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, you okay? All right?
Yeah, I really appreciate the feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's great. All right, looking at the agenda, just reminding you of the calendar of upcoming events. The only thing that's not in there, between May 17th and July 26th, I think it's the first week of June, declaration of candidacy for the city elections coming up. Also,
that's correct.
There's something about Tennessee in there, so I was
I probably-
Sort of like mine.
Declaration
Yeah,
of
and last
candidacy.
meeting, you called me out for not being able to do that.
That's what I thought.
I can't.
You hear how I gave her that, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Mayor Colmore.
But,
All right, so any questions on the calendar of things coming up?
trespass.
If not, we have two items of discussion in closed session. So, need a motion to.
What are they?
do both?
Personnel and litigation or what?
Shane,
Yes.
personnel?
What's that?
One's litigation.
Yeah, one's
Litigation and, personnel.
Yeah, both.
We close the open session and open the closed session for the purposes of discussing litigation and then personnel.
Just a second, all in favor?
Aye.